The point is, Derrick Henry's a big truck, and I like my big trucks coming downhill. They're more dangerous that way, rolling down a hill. And so for him to gather the momentum that it takes to get that thing moving, it's nice to have him at the home. Well, Lamar threw for 230 yards a game last year. I think 15 of those yards a game or so were under center. So the pass game is not what it is when he's under center. So if you give Derrick what he wants, Lamar doesn't have what he wants, and vice versa. The pistol is the great American compromise. As you've heard, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for you listeners each week. If y'all haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code GREENLIGHT, and you will get up to $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. 1, download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code GREENLIGHT. 2, deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. 3, you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code GREENLIGHT when you sign up. Happy hump day, everybody. We are much closer to the Sunday slate than we were yesterday, and that's all I can ask for, especially because I'm going to be in chase mode after that Monday night game. I mean, just unbelievable. I told you guys about that remote control I carried from one building to another. Like I was so frustrated at the end of the game, I took the remote, walked into the other, walked outside to my studio, walked upstairs, above the garage, still had the remote control. My wife, for 24 hours, where's the remote control? The Eagles did it. I sent her a picture. I got the remote control, and it's sitting on top. I posted this on Twitter. It's sitting on top of my plate notes. For people at home, and somebody just hit me on this, like, look, I got fucking plates that I take notes on, paper plates. And before you say, well, that's stupid, let me tell you why. It really is. It's a pragmatic thing. I take notes on plates during games because plates are easier to prop up. Try propping up a piece of paper. You know, there's nothing more annoying than being like, where's this note in my binder? And then you got to rip it out and you got to order them correctly. I can interchange the plates. I can prop multiple plates up against my laptop so I can reference my notes during a breakdown. Another thing about plates is they stack. They don't rip like paper.
And 2 uses. If you're eating chips off your plates watching the games, you can eat and then be like, oh, right, I had that point about, the Broncos.
You're exactly right. A lot of people would say, hey, there's a lot of paper in that plate. Stop cutting trees down. And I say, yeah, I agree with you generally, but I'm getting really 3 uses out of this plate because, there's the eat the chips, then there's the take notes about the Eagles pass rush, and then there's the eat my feelings late at night, and I can use the same plate.
And if it goes bad, you can always Frisbee toss it, which you can't do.
You can always Frisbee toss it. There's arts and crafts things I can do with this plate. But anyways, let me tell you what's on the plates. Enough about the plates. Let me tell you what's on the plates today. Okay, because I was just down in the cafeteria of Inside the NFL. Can you prop that up against your Pepsi? Who drinks Pepsi, Nolan?
I need caffeine.
Yeah, you need caffeine. Imagine being me. Imagine being me. Can't even drink coffee. All right, so anyways – there's a few things I just wanted to run down. I had 4 or 5 hours in the car yesterday getting ready to, go up to Inside the NFL. We had a lot of fun this week. First off, this football guy segment's a lot of fun. I know if you've watched Inside the NFL, you probably think it's our best segment. I think it's our best segment. It's basically me, Ocho Cinco, and Ryan sucking up to Bill, trying to get him to pick our football guy of the week. Now, I know, pardon my take, fans have – I've noticed in the mentions that they're cease and desist, the whole thing. But you didn't invent the term football guy, Dan and PFT. You kind of took the term football guy. It's just like the Mount Rushmore thing. People for eons have been saying, hey, who's on your Mount Rushmore of this thing? And because they do it better than anybody else, then it's like their IP. Respectfully, I would say we get to use the football guy moniker as well. And that's with all due respect because I love those guys. But it's a totally different segment. We are talking about guys that don't get enough credit or had a performance Sunday that demanded Coach Belichick laying eyes on either footage or some statistics from the game that might sway him into picking your guy. Week 1, Ryan Clark goes Joe Witt Jr., obviously just trying to book the guy for the pivot. Ocho Cinco, I can't remember who he went week 1. Juwan Jennings. How could I forget? He won the inaugural winner of Football Guy of the Week. And then week 2, we had I went with Keon White and got the win. And Ryan's complaining, saying, "You're just sucking up to Bill. You're picking Patriots players." And then I picked Keon White. So there's a lot of crying and complaining. Watch the show tonight on CW and find out who won. I'm just a little spoiler alert here. You get a little bit of intel on this show that you can't get until 8, 7 Central or whenever it is on the CW. I nominated Gardner Minshew, and I looked Coach dead in the eyes, and I said, "Let's play a game of who am I? Would that be okay?" And of course, he just nods. And I said, "Coach, I'm the only quarterback in the NFL to throw for 250 yards every game of the season so far. All right? You know, I forget what else I said. I was just rattling shit off.
Was it Ken Stabler?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I said I'm the only guy that's thrown for over 250 yards a game this season. I said, you know, I went out there. These other quarterbacks, they all need a warm-up. They need preseason. Football guys don't need a warm-up. Gardner Minshew, he's ready to go right now. You know, he went out Sunday and he threw the football over those mountains, as Uncle Rico would say, and he went right at those corners from Baltimore, that vaunted Baltimore defense. People are saying that Gardner Minshew is Ken Stabler reincarnated. People are saying he has a menthol aura. People are saying he's little out here, but not always. I'm Gardner Minshew. Nice to meet you, Coach. Now, did he pick Gardner Minshew? You have to turn into the CW to find out. But I think I made a really provocative case for why Gardner Minshew should, quite frankly, not just win the award this week, but the award should be renamed the Gardner Minshew Award. Talk about eating W's. I can still taste that win on my flavor saver. When I eat a W, it sticks around till Tuesday. I'm Gardner Minshew. I'm a football guy. So enjoy that show if you do tune in and root for my football guy. Listen, last night, you know, it's kind of one of those things midweek where you kind of got to make up some topics or topics catch your eye, and you're like, really, Monday, there's such a rush to watch all the damn games. Sometimes you miss things. And this midweek pod is a good opportunity to get me fresh off of a 5-hour car ride, ruminating about shit like why the Eagles don't know what Kirk Cousins even smells like the other night. Like they couldn't even tell you what cologne he wears. Like they weren't even close. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, is the pass rush broken? I mean, I'm mocking trades in my head for Howie Roseman for 2 hours in the car ride. So I got some wacky shit to pitch here, and I also have some trades that actually make sense. And I know it's early to talk about trades, but it's never too early, right? I think one of the hard things right now about making a trade in the NFL, and we'll talk about a couple of these teams. By the way, Chase Daniel got me in the mood to do this coming in, because as much as I was talking about brokering a trade between a few of these teams that have issues that they need to put out, fires they need to put out, Chase Daniel was cooking a little bit, talking about Miami going to get Matt Stafford in a 3-team trade. It was very NBA. Now, I'm not going to pretend to understand the mechanics of a 3-team trade, nor am I going to pretend that in Chase Daniel's model for a deal that there was enough capital from the Rams' perspective. But he proposed a 3-team trade. Rams get Bryce Young, Dolphins get Matthew Stafford, Panthers get Dolphins 2nd, and Rams 3rd rounder. Okay. I don't know that that's the most robust compensation. Like, it's not going to work out like necessarily with the points of compensation that he pointed out. And I think Chase is the man. I think he's great at this. I really enjoy watching Chase. I don't know, think up stuff like this, break film down. But I like the idea of Miami trading for somebody, right? You know, Tua's on short IR, at least now. That's 4 games. We really don't know. That could be to buy them more time to figure out like what he needs to do to get back, or if he's coming back at all. I know it's kind of become faux pas to like even talk about the possibility of him retiring as if that's like the most thoughtless thing you can do. I thought we were being like thoughtful, thinking of the person, not the player. But a lot of people are saying, hey, don't talk about retirement. That's not the most important thing right now for Tua. Tua just needs to, and that's true. But I would be thinking about the prospect of him not coming back this year. And like, if there's a chance of that happening, and only they know, and maybe they don't right now, they need to go make a move, right? Because I don't think Mike McDaniel has a lot of time to sit around and, play Skylar Thompson. This is a team whose window's been open a couple years. I think certain things have held them back. And now, most certainly, this could hold you back. And this in the context of the team not looking like themselves, even last year's version of them the first 2 weeks of the year. Like, even before Tua got hurt, I did not think they looked like themselves through 6 quarters of football. And, I'm not a buyer on that version of them prior to him getting hurt. But now I'm definitely like, you got to do something. Do something, brother. So I would look at them and say, go out and get a quarterback. I don't know if Matt Stafford's the swing I want to make. If I'm Miami and you listen to the Green Light Pod, I said all offseason I think Dak would have been the move, right? But obviously he had the no trade clause. The number was huge. You got a quarterback already. I think the Carson Wentz thing still has legs. I'm not sure that it's like realistic, because the prospect of Andy Reid dumping a valuable backup in the middle of a run where you're trying to, go for a three-peat seems kind of crazy. But if I'm Miami, I got to make a move. And I don't know, check out that Chase Daniel package. That's what she said. Didn't mean it like that at all. So anyways, that trade proposal only got me more in the mood to get in here and talk about how to fix, I don't know, maybe one of your favorite teams. There's a couple teams I want to talk about. And yeah, it is interesting early in the season to think about, like, who do we even call if we need something, right? Like, it's so early. What teams have packed it in already? Like, what coaches? It's got to be a bad team, and it's got to be a coach that has the security to say, hey, I'm not going to lose my job selling parts right now. Like, if you're Sean Payton, that's one of the only teams I look at right now that I'm like, man, I've seen enough to know they're not going places this year. And I'm sure Sean Payton feels the same way. Even if he really likes Bo Nixon, that's his guy. I look at that team and I'm saying, like, why do you have Cortland Sutton on the roster? He doesn't throw the ball more than 5-10 yards down the field anyways. Garrett Bowles is 32. He's going to be up next year. Maybe give that guy his walking papers so he can go enjoy seeing how the other side lives. A la a guy like me late in my career, where it's like you haven't won a lot. It's been up and down. And, I would hope that for some of these guys on teams like Denver, you get an opportunity to escape. Because by the time you're good, I don't know if these guys are still going to be where they are. And Reed, you're the resident Broncos fan, but I look at like a team like Denver and I say, hey, maybe it's not week 2, but it could be week 4 they're selling. And if you're Howie Roseman looking at edge rushers, or you're Brad Holmes in Detroit looking at the wide receiver room, or you're Green Bay looking for another corner, or you're Baltimore and you can't afford a wide receiver, but like, let's look anyway. Or you're Arizona. Nolan asked me a question last night, and he was like, maybe what would be interesting for you to talk about is, you've said on a couple occasions here that if this team had a top 10 defense, they're as scary as anybody. And maybe you said it, Matt. So let me give you credit where credit's due. You can put your hand up if it was you.
It was me, but I wasn't going to do the Macon thing where I deserved credit for it. I was happy to give it to Nolan.
Okay, good. Well, it was a good question, and it was a good observation. It's like, are they a team that thinks, hey, we're good enough to win now. We're good enough to do something, brother. And I do think they're in that do something, brother category. It's not the like, do something, our window's wide open and there's a house fire in the offensive line room. We need to do something. It's not that kind of thing. But it's like, hey, you know what? Maybe we're a year ahead of schedule.
Especially with the way that Kyler looks, and given his history of some health concerns, it's like, hey, we're playing great right now.
So if you're Monty Ossenfort, are you on the phone, or are you looking around the league and saying, how can I fortify my defense while this window's open and the quarterback is healthy and everybody's good and we've got a rookie wide receiver who looks like a stud. We've got a rookie deal tight end who's a stud. We've got all these pieces. You got James Conner. The bottom hasn't fallen out from under him. And make no mistake, as much as I like Petzing and the job they've done, like James Conner's been doing this. And James Conner's a guy that deserves respect. And also he's a guy that's taken a beating. So, if there's an opportunity to be ahead of schedule, maybe they need to look out there. And, the guys I mentioned, they're all thinking about who can I go out and get to help, whether it's week 3, week 7, like right before the deadline, whatever it is. You got to start looking now, although most teams are saying, hey, we're still trying to win, even if they know they're not going to win. Like, it is a tough admission to trade a piece on a team that's 0-2, right? And it says something to the rest of the players in the locker room. So in no way am I saying these trades are realistic. This is me sitting in the car for 5 hours thinking about trades. Okay, me playing GM on an edible in the back of an SUV on my way from Virginia to New Jersey. So one of the trades I'm going to mention is I need a ticker underneath, and it's going to say, I don't actually believe this is going to happen. And that's still not going to deter some of you guys from pointing out that it's not going to happen. I just know how you are. But when we get there, I'm going to need that chyron, as we call it in the industry, that says, Chris doesn't actually believe this. But I would challenge you to tell me why it wouldn't work. Okay. Here's some situations. We'll start with my Eagles. I know they're my Eagles because and listen, I try to do this job in a really unbiased fashion, but I'll admit it, when the Eagles lose, you get a little bit more emotion out of me. I start forgetting I got a remote control in my hand, things like that. And that pass rush the other night was not good. And so if that's what it's going to be, there are things you can work around in the secondary. There are ways you can work around an offensive lineman on the offensive line. You can give a tackle chip help. You can slide to a guard. You can speed the process up, with the quarterback's operation to try to work around an offensive lineman. If you've got piss poor options outside, you can run the football, but the one thing you can't run from in today's NFL is if your group can't win one-on-ones, your ceiling is lowered considerably. And I'm not saying we're there yet looking at the Eagles, but I think they're one team that should be thinking about making a move at some point. And, I look at it and there's a few tiers of things you could do. You can, to me, no brainer would be kick the tires on Baron Browning, a guy who, almost had me excited enough to invest in his, what are we even calling this now? His future, what do we call this thing that I said I was going to do but never did?
It's a company called Vestable that allows you to invest in an athlete's future earning potential.
Well, I'll invest in his future earning potential if he's wearing midnight green, but I need somebody to go get me one guy who can win a rush, or get me somebody outside who's an unknown commodity, a distressed asset. Give me somebody that I don't already know who they are. And I got no issue with the guy, Josh Sweat, I think is a good player. I've always thought that. You've taken some swings at guys in early rounds that haven't panned out as rushers, and I don't count Jalen Carter in that category, but I'll tell you what you need in that room. You need a veteran. I know you got Brandon Graham, but he's 36. He can't do it all. And what happens when he rides off into the sunset? And is it Milton Williams is your oldest player in that room? That would be no bueno. So the things you have to do, and a way to get a jump on free agency, is to go get somebody in a trade, right? So I would go out looking for a veteran. Baron Browning's a name I toss out there. He's a rusher I like on a bad team. Somebody said Khalil Mack, right? Maybe the Chargers would want to get out from under that impending contract, right? And he's older. Maybe they'd want something for him. I don't think so. I think that's way too early on a team that's way too convinced of their talent, or at least what they're going to do this year. The vibes are too good to be sending off Khalil Mack. That signals something. Okay, so probably unrealistic. I look at I look at as we're here, like talking about Arizona, that's a different conversation. You're trying to swing for the fences, right? Like for me, I would go look at Hassan Reddick. If I was Arizona, I think you make the call. I'm not sure if they've already made the call. And if they don't make the call, that says something. And it might explain why Hassan's not in Philly anymore. Because if John Gannon, who knew him well and coached him to probably the best 16 seconds, best year of his career, if he's not at least kicking the tires on this guy, that's probably a bad sign. But I think from what I see on film, like the Hassan Reddick, the player, like he's had success with John, and immediately with Gardeck, like you've got a better rush group. You can flip a defensive line like that. You can't sign an all-world left tackle and make a 5 deep group of fucking Jakes look better. Like that's just not going to happen. But what you can do when you have a guy that demands slide, demands attention, frees up other players, is one player can flip an entire defensive line. And if I was Arizona, I'd be taking that shot. I think Zach Allen is a guy for the Broncos who should be on people's radars if they want pass rush. He's got one of the best pass rush win rates of the young season. And it's so easy to call him a poor man's J.J. Watt because he wears 99. He's one of these big lumbering white guys. But I mean that as a compliment. Like, he's a very good player. Being a poor man's J.J. Watt's still like being upper class. So I look at the Zach Allen kid, the little hidden gems like that where you're like, hey, he'd be a good guy to bring in, whether it's in Philly or in Arizona. I'd take them in any shape or size as long as they can win rushes, right?
Those are two reunions you just mentioned, Zach Allen and Hassan Reddick, both going back, if they were to go back to Arizona, both former Cards.
Yeah, if I was Arizona and I was dead serious about winning this year, I'd go get both of them. And I don't know, like Arizona fans, they might say, hey, you're dumb. You don't know the cap situation. You don't know, like, I think they have room to operate. You might say, hey, we don't want to give up all that capital. Like, I'm just saying, if you're serious about this year, like, these are some names that I'm throwing out there. And for the Eagles, and this is where I need the Chiron, sure, you could go get Baron Browning or the like. You could go kick the tires on Clowney, who I think would be a more reasonably priced player, right? Like, you probably are sending a mid-round pick to Carolina for Clowney, and Clowney probably doesn't want to be in Carolina anymore. Like, how green is the money in Carolina? It's no greener than the money in Baltimore. I don't want to shovel shit for a living at 32 years old or whatever and like deal with what I'm dealing with in Carolina. He'd be jumping at the opportunity to go play in Philly. Now, he has a reputation of being on again, off again. Okay. And I'm a Clowney fan, but do you want that to be your vet? Do you want that to be the guy because you know what you need in that room? You need a vet for a lot of reasons, but there's one asset you have in that room. You could be sitting on a gold mine. And when I hear things like Jalen Carter didn't start because he's late to a meeting, like, I need a man in that room. You know what I mean? Like a man. And I'm not talking about just BG, because BG is a great leader and everything, but you can't ask BG. It's like BG's fucking daycare center in that room. Like, you can't ask him to watch all those kids. He doesn't have a rope like a preschool teacher where he can tie them all together and walk to and from church. Like, it's not like that. It doesn't work that way. You need multiple vets in that room. I don't know if Clowney's that vet, but as far as a guy who can win a one-on-one, if you were to take a chance at this thing and say, hey, this could close our window that's open, then you need a guy that can win one-on-ones. Now, here's the one. I think this was about when the edible kicked in. And I need the Chiron. I don't even know how I say it. Like, I don't need to build up to it. If I was Howie Roseman, and you're going to say, it would never happen, that's fucking fine. Go along with this exercise. It's Fantasyland. I'm Howie Roseman. I call the Browns, and I say, what's it going to cost to send me Myles Garrett? I notice you might get out of this Deshaun contract at some point. You're going to be cap poor for a couple of years. You're going to get some cash back. But what you need assets. You need the assets to build this team again. I am giving you a mulligan, a get-out-of-jail-free card, not for Deshaun Watson. I'm talking about for the Cleveland Browns. You guys royally fucked this up, and here I am like a little angel flying from Philadelphia on my little green wings. And what do I have in my hands? I got 2 first-round picks, a 2 or a 3. You want Kenny Pickett, we'll throw you Kenny Pickett, to help give you more options to bridge this thing as you clean up this absolute mess you created in Cleveland. And I know some people are going to say, Deshaun looked better last week. You can tell me that every week. And I'm going to stay silent. I'm going to ignore you until you show me a game where he looks like what you gave up to get him. Don't tell me, you won a game last week. If there's a chance for them to get out of this deal because of a suspension that's impending, and that, of course, has to happen before 2025. I think I'm understanding this correctly. You will have an out. So if that's the case, I pitched this. I pitched this to somebody downstairs a second ago. My man Josh here, who's great. I was like, Josh, who says no? Howie Roseman, give you 2 1s, give you a 2 or a 3. Give you Kenny Pickett. If you don't think Kenny Pickett's any good, then just walk in the store and pick something. Like, you want Bryce Huff? Like, walk in the store and pick something. I'm not saying this is realistic. You see the bottom of the screen. But what I am saying is you got to take shots. That's what Howie Roseman is known for. And maybe this is an extreme shot. And maybe there's something like maybe there's like a Zadarius Smith type guy where it's like, hey, that's an asset that, you could send something over for somebody like that. But the point is, you need to take a big swing at this thing because you have aspirations to win the Super Bowl. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten Saquon Barkley. You wouldn't have put this team together. And I think their window is open. They put the fire out in the secondary, and the secondary didn't look great late last game, but they're just sitting back. And without the edge rushers, it's going to be really hard for these guys, especially the young ones. So for me, I need somebody who can win a rush. How about maybe the best defensive end in football? Maybe, right? Like, and to most people that would say, hey, why would they do that? You tell me what the better option is for Cleveland. You want to just hoard people and ruin their careers and waste their potential? Or do you want to get some assets for them while you still can? Because I can't tell from where I'm sitting, and Miles might be good until 40, but I can't tell for sure when the next time Cleveland's really going to be good. Not with this quarterback under contract. And so if you can offload him, and this is all hypothetical, then maybe you need some capital to start over with. And I would send you as much as you want for Myles Garrett. You'd have a vet in the room. You'd have a guy that makes everybody's life easier. You think you got 4 guys who can't win one-on-ones? Watch that turn into like none. I'm just telling you how Myles Garrett or somebody like that, you could send me 3/4 of a Myles Garrett, whoever that would be. Like, go out and give me, in a perfect world, go out and give me somebody as good as Trey Hendrickson. Like, he's still going to change the game. That's not going to happen. But the point is, like, the Eagles got to do something, brother. Because just waiting for these guys to win rushes, it's a gamble you don't want to take. And I know the Myles Garrett thing's extreme, but hear me out. And if you're saying why not, I would challenge you to tell me why not if you're the Browns. I keep hearing, well, you don't just trade away your best defensive player. Well, you don't just guarantee money to a guy with a bunch of civil cases hanging over his head who we're not sure if he can play football anymore. So these are extenuating circumstances. You're in a box that's more unique than any box anybody's ever been in. So don't tell me about the fucking rules. And it might hurt your feelings to watch Myles Garrett join the ranks of somebody like, like the Reggie Whites and the Jerome Browns, and that might hurt. But you know what also hurts? Fucking rotting away with no draft capital and a guy who I'm not even sure can throw the ball anymore, that you're just hoping like the story goes away, and it won't. It won't. So listen, I know it's probably not going to happen, but it is fun to talk about. This is an exercise. Okay, we talked about Arizona needing edge rush. We talked about the Eagles needing edge rush. I also think like one situation on a contending team that needs to be taken care of, doesn't need to be taken care of, but it should be taken care of at some point, is like, I think Detroit could use another guy outside. Like, I really do. Amon-Ra St. Brown, a little banged up. They throw him a lot of balls. Like, this guy's a tough SOB, but, and by SOB, I mean son of a bodybuilder. But, like, he's a tough guy. He's going to take shots all year. If he's got to miss a week or two, the way for you to go to the Super Bowl is to have home field advantage. They can't fuck around and be 10-7. Like you can't afford to have one of these guys miss time, whether it's J-Mo or Amon-Ra St. Brown, and drop a game because you just don't have the horses outside. Tim Patrick did get a couple of targets the other day, but like that's not what I want to have to rely on. And so we've made this point like all offseason, like I wouldn't be surprised if Detroit is a buyer at the trade deadline. And one guy that I think would be fantastic in Detroit, he would be awesome. And by the way, Cleveland and Brad Holmes, they've done business in the last calendar year. A little bit more under the radar. Donovan Peoples-Jones, right? Well, let me call them back since I got it in my call history and kick the tires on a guy like Amari Cooper, who's not off to a great start. Imagine that. And you just dangled him in a trade this offseason, so he's probably not happy. Like, I think you could probably make that work from a cap standpoint. Like, Cortland Sutton, I mentioned him in Denver. Like, somebody's got to make a run at him. I think last year people talked about making a run at him. Like, this is the year to do it. And I think, like, Detroit has to add a guy. I mean, like, it doesn't have to be the best player ever. I would love to see them have more of a possession receiver in the arsenal. And I mean a big possession receiver. Like, J-Mo's a burner, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown's a guy who does work in the slot. You got a tight end. Like, how about a guy you can just throw a back shoulder fade to? How about a guy you can, like, toss the ball up to in the corner of the red zone where they have struggled? So I think Detroit's got to be looking at a wide receiver. And then that leads me to Baltimore, who should definitely be looking at a wide receiver, but probably can't afford one. Okay? And they have made their bed. I'd much rather be sleeping in this bed than Cleveland's. But they've made their bed in that they didn't really do anything outside for Lamar, right? Like, you could nitpick, and I don't know, maybe somebody's going to be like, well, second day they added somebody or something. I don't know. I don't care. I'm just telling you, I'm watching the receiving core. And as much as I respect Nelly, who's played on some great teams, you got some great experience there. He can make plays for you. I respect Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers is exciting, right? Like, he's an exciting player. I think those two tight ends, like Mark Andrews, he's 29 years old. Isaiah Likely is a bona fide rack artist, like get him the ball as much as you can. But the point is like the guys outside are not great. Okay. And there's nothing you can do about that right now other than figure out how to run your offense. And when I watch Baltimore and you crunch the numbers, like they asked me to take Baltimore today on Inside the NFL. And I had a whole damn thing about, statistics and how, and this is all legit. Derrick Henry does not love running out of the gun. Lamar Jackson likes to operate out of the gun. So anytime you want to run Derrick Henry, and so far this year it's been 7 yards a pop. So if you include the pistol, which is basically the same alignment, pistol is quarterback in the gun. It's like a short gun with, I guess that's why they call it the pistol. It's a shorter gun with Lamar right behind, the center, but he's snapping it to him. You guys know what I'm talking about, but some people are like, slow down, what's the pistol? You got a back right behind you in the home. Like the point is Derrick Henry's a big truck, and I like my big trucks coming downhill. They're more dangerous that way, rolling down a hill. And so for him to gather the momentum that it takes to get that thing moving, it's nice to have him at the home. Well, Lamar threw for 230 yards a game last year. I think 15 of those yards a game or so were under center. So the pass game is not what it is when he's under center. So if you give Derrick what he wants, Lamar doesn't have what he wants, and vice versa. The pistol is the great American compromise in a lot of ways. Okay? And I'm looking at Derrick Henry and the pistol, and they'll get on the perimeter, and he's fucking people up on the perimeter. Like, he still looks good out there, going out there to flatten little people. And if they can figure out how to get into the pistol and have their looks marry up a little bit better, because here's the other thing. Justice Hill is a good back, and they're going to need him until Keaton Mitchell gets back and maybe beyond. But every time he's in the game, there are tells. When Justice Hill's in the game, I know this might be like most backs in the gun, but I think there are some alignment tells. I think it's, I think there's tells when he's about to get the ball. He's a little bit behind Lamar when he's split out to get out. At least looking at the game against Vegas, I think there are a lot of tells. So you have these issues, and I'm not going to say the Ravens were irresponsible not thinking about the delta in the styles of play between their two backs. There's a change of pace back, and then there's like two backs that are so different that you can't marry your formations up. And I think like for a guy like me who's been out of football for a couple of years to look at a team, and this is what we used to do for a living, was try to get a tell formationally, like they're not making it that hard. I'm not saying it's vanilla. I think a lot of the problems are outside, right? Where like they don't have dynamic cats outside. I came in to talk about all that, but after looking back at that game, there's one thing that was even more important to me, and that's a bona fide position battle at right tackle. They got Macari, who's their heir apparent right tackle. He's a veteran. He's probably more of a run blocker, and he's kind of the penciled-in starter. They also have this guy, Roger Rosengarten. Roger Rosegarden is what I call him, because I want to give him his flowers, man. This guy is this guy's been rotating in at tackle over the first two games, okay? And that's not normal to rotate tackles. It actually can throw players off, like myself. Like I remember we played Houston once, and they're rotating tackles, and I'm like, I don't even know what – and Bill told a funny story today where I was telling him about that, and he's like, fuck, that reminds me. That's because you watch film. He goes – I had Ted Washington. I used to ask him, who we playing this week, Ted? And he said, it doesn't matter. Like I have no idea who the guy is. But the point is like we come into a situation and we're prepping to beat one guy. Like, so if you're rotating, it can be effective, but it's not done a lot. And it's become apparent to me that this is a position battle. You knew it coming in. Like this kid was going to push Macari, and they are literally giving a guy one drive or two drives, and then the rookie comes in, and then vice versa. And I went back to look at this fucking Raiders game to look for formational tells and try to see if I get a beat on, Derrick in the home, Derrick in pistol, Derrick offset, Justice Hill. And what I came away from this game talking about was the damn tackle situation, because Max Crosby lit that game on fire. Like it was absolute arson the first quarter. They couldn't even get situated, right? Like he's wrecking all types of plays. But he's definitely wrecking the pass game, right? And this guy, Rosengarten, am I getting that right?
Rosengarten, yeah.
Rosengarten. He comes in the game, and I'm like, holy shit, is he blocking Max Crosby a little bit? And this is 2 minutes at the end of the half. So, like, he's getting a drive where they're throwing the ball. They start out in, tempo a little bit, like, because they got to go. But then when it gets down to it, it's like this isn't one of those possessions where they're just running the ball and Max doesn't get any opportunities. Like, this kid's setting out and he's dancing with Max Crosby. And he's doing the mirror drill a little bit. Now, it could be a circumstance of Max Crosby wasn't ready for the rotating factor and, like, it just threw him off. It could be the fact that Rosengarten has some length, and Max Crosby's got great length. That's the differentiating factor with Max Crosby is his length. I swear to God, he does a better job of running full speed and looking like he's not running full speed at the front of his rush than anybody, because his legs are so damn long and his arms are so damn long. He'll be running right at you and closing the distance, and you're thinking this guy's jogging, but he's closing the distance. And this Rosengarten kid has some good length, and he's blocking him. And I know it's just one series, and then they yank him, and I'm watching Macari, and he's doing a fine job in the run game and that sort of thing, but he's surviving out on the edge in pass pro. They put this kid Rosengarten back in, and it's like when he's in, nothing catastrophic happens. I went back and looked at the Kansas City game, and he gave up a sack to Chris Jones, and maybe I didn't get to all the plays on the back of the game, but for the most part, What I saw was a guy who's ready to play. He's ready for the big show. And to me, we can talk all about these numbers, which are widely available now to anyone. You could say, hey, Derrick Henry, he's going to run for 7 yards a pop under center or home alignment. You offset him, you take away the fastball. They got issues there with predictability and that sort of thing. I think they'll figure that out. How about committing to the run game? Outside of that, though, this is something that can change the way this offense operates. Like this, I want you to listen to what I'm saying and don't frame it as a critique of Lamar. Lamar is a top 5 quarterback, like bona fide MVP. I got to say this every time because it's such a polarizing fucking topic. I have never been the one to say he can't throw from inside the pocket. I have never been the one to call him a running back. Never, not once. Dating back to being on Ryan Russillo's show, I can remember that one of the topics was, is this sustainable? I said he's going to be good for a long time for this team. So he's a passer. But I don't know that he's a timing passer. Where Tua, his superpower is the processing. It's the, hey, I just know where to go with the ball right now. And as the play breaks down, nothing good happens, right? There's a little bit of that question mark I have with Jalen Hurts on extended downs where it's like later in the downs, you're making some bad decisions. And most quarterbacks do the longer the down goes on. But Lamar Jackson, for a couple of reasons. Number one, he doesn't have a choice. Guys outside are not like dynamic as a whole. So it's going to take more time for them to find windows. And sometimes because of the protection, they're getting less guys out in the route. So what I want to see is a dancing bear at right tackle who can take away your number one rusher. And don't pump fake me, kid. Go do this next week when I hope to God they put you in the game. Because you're going to get an opportunity against Tank Lawrence. You're going to get an opportunity against Micah Parsons. And so is Baltimore going to run the ball and make it hard on the rushers the way New Orleans did? Shit, you should be able to. The spine of that defense, the middle of that defense is ripe. It's ripe for the taking, right? But you got to block these guys outside. And if you've got this guy out there that can dance with at least one of the top rushers on the defensive line, then Lamar has more time to make things happen. The longer the down goes on, the more I think Lamar is going to kill somebody. Like, I don't, the longer the down goes on with Jalen the other night, I'm like, oh, you're rolling right. Just take off or don't. And he made some good throws as the game went on. But the point I'm making about Lamar is, like, scramble drill is his friend, and if you've got a right tackle who's going to be able to hold down one of the best rushers on the line, if not somebody like Max Crosby week to week, I say you err on the side of getting the passing game right. Because you can coach 5 guys into being hungry and running the football and, scheming people up. And you've got Derrick Henry. Hey, whoever's torso or arm happens to be in the gap, Derrick will take care of that. If you got an unblocked guy, Derrick's going to take care of him. That's why you brought him in. So don't keep the guy in who's a good run specialist. No disrespect to this guy. I just think the rookie looks really good. Like, I was enthralled. And maybe I was just, looking for something, but I feel like that kid's ready for the big show. Talking about Baltimore's situation, I mean, like, predictability on offense, definitely a thing. And I think this right tackle battle is a big issue. And there's nothing you can do outside right now, right? Because you don't have the cap space. You can't make that work. But I do think offensively there's hope for this group for a couple of the reasons I just mentioned. If you just fix these things, defensively, the linebackers are still a step down from who they were last year. And I think one of the most telling things about this group is how many explosives the defense has given up early this season. They're near the bottom of the league last year. I think they're near the top of the league this year in explosives allowed, and top being the bottom. You know what I'm saying? So just a lot to chew on there with Baltimore and a few of these teams. Like, there are some teams here that I mentioned that need to be thinking ahead. Like, what fires are you going to have to put out? Because one of the topics today on Inside the NFL was, you're at the week 2 mark. What does a coach do? Do you have a good idea of your team and what you need to do going forward? Like, I think you have a lot better idea of your team week 2 than week 1. It's obvious because you played twice as many games, but you also get to see guys like Roger Rosengarten get an opportunity to block different looks. You get to see if week one's a fluke. You get to see how he looks against Max Crosby. Yeah, I think these teams should all be thinking about the things I just said. I know the Miles thing's not going to happen.
Can I ask real fast? So back to, you mentioned Arizona and Philly looking for some defensive help, specifically along the D-line. This isn't a trade, rather someone who's out there, a free agent. Unique Ngakoue. He's sub 30. He's not 30 years old yet, and he's got almost 70 sacks in the NFL.
Whose baby did he punch?
Right? He had 4 sacks for the Bears last season, which was down some of his production, but still, he's 70 sacks and he's under 30 years old. He's had some great seasons.
The problem is, and I think I'm speaking for teams, he is a defensive end, but I'll never forget when I met, because I liked him and Fowler a lot early on in their careers, and I still like him. Fowler, by the way, has found a little home in Washington. We were playing him in London. Your boy had a 2-piece riding high after the game, dapping up these 2 rushers and complimenting them on just who they can be. And they stayed and talked to me. I'm like Caleb Williams pulling away from CJ Stroud. But they were so small. They were like backers. I was like, damn, I thought you were bigger. And I got a ton of respect for Unique Ngakoue. I think he is criminally underrated as a rusher and a guy that should have a job. But if you're Philly, is it redundant to bring in a guy like him because you already got a guy that you are apprehensively playing on first and second down in Huff? And so I'm not going to comment anymore on the Philly current personnel. And this isn't a slight, but when you lose a guy like Fletcher Cox, when you let Hassan Reddick walk, you really do put the pressure on somebody to be the guy. And guess what? The guy is usually pretty easy to see out there. The guy doesn't just start being the guy week 5. The guy, I can tell weeks 1 and 2. Jalen can be the guy, but I need an adult in the room on top of BG, right? Because it can't just all be BG's daycare center. And more than anything, I need a guy who can win on one-on-ones and make things easier on Carter and maybe some of the other guys who aren't quite as far along. And I think Chris Lindstrom, we made it about Carter as Philly fans the other night. Lindstrom's damn good. And so you got to win those matchups when you get them. Milton Williams did. Listen, last thing I want to talk. Oh, by the way, I mentioned, how about somebody going and kicking the tires on J.C. Horn? A guy like that who's rotten in Carolina and, Green Bay. We talked about those corner battles up there kind of panning out in a way that you're like, maybe they could use some help. There's other teams that are going to need a corner. And it is early. I don't want to blow all our trade deadline content right now, but that's kind of on top of my mind because there are teams that need to get moving and do something, brother. Last piece of news here that I just wanted to hit on, and I guess I'll talk about the Caleb thing a little bit, but Bryce Young has been benched by the Carolina Panthers. You have already been hit over the head with this story. We already alluded to it with Chase Daniel cooking up a trade that would send him to L.A. I actually think Miami, it'd be worth taking a flyer on the kid. I do. And chances are, if it works out, here's why I say, because I said this earlier on Twitter, there's a picture of Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield in Carolina Panthers jerseys walking off the field and bussing with the boys, tweeted, send this to a Panthers fan today. And I quote tweeted, and I said, send this to Bryce Young to cheer him up. Because I'm not saying the kid's going to pan out, but what I am saying is he's had an uphill battle. And I don't think people understand, just because the guy has an opportunity or because they paid him a fuck ton of money doesn't mean that, A, it discounts the utter chaos that he walked into, or B, that he's not feeling shitty about his life right now. I can tell you, everybody says don't worry about the money. Fans are always like, hey, you should play for the love of the game. And then when you're rich and you're upset because your job's not going well and you put everything into it and you really give a fuck, like really give a fuck. Like, I care way more about my reputation than my money for the rest of my life. And you got people like, I don't feel bad for this kid. Well, it's not about feeling bad for this kid, but what we're not going to do is sit here and say that the situation was great, you know? And what we're not going to do is act like bad situations don't hide talent sometimes. And like that picture is evidence of that. And so I would send that to Bryce Young and say, hey, look, it might not work out here, and I'm not making any excuses for you here. Like, it hasn't been perfect. I'm not saying, oh, give him a second look. But what I'm saying is, like, when a team discards this guy, there should be somebody out there that looks at this kid and, hey, maybe if they don't, with all the success that Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield had in their second stops after going to West Coast quarterback camp in San Francisco and LA respectively, maybe if somebody doesn't take a look at Bryce in the same way, then the tape is really that bad to people that know ball better than me, right? Like, I know quarterbacks, but I ain't these guys. But I would say, you know, like, to Bryce, there are guys that have escaped Alcatraz. You know, you can be Nick Cage, you can be Sean Connery. You know, winners go home and fuck the prom queen. That's from the movie, The Rock. Okay, I don't really think that. I think you can win without fucking the prom queen. You know? No, I think the whole thing that I want to drive home is, don't tell me we've seen everything we need to see to know exactly who we can't write this guy's headstone. You know, and you can say that without throwing a pity party for the guy. I mean, I'm not saying it's borderline malpractice, but if people are going to complain about the situation Caleb Williams is in right now, then you cannot write Bryce Young off at all. And if you're that same person, you got to check yourself. Because I look at Bryce's situation and say last year that, like, organizationally, you got an owner who's distressing that asset every day. He presides over it. You had a coach that, by all accounts, and he's a guy I love, there was a lot of double talk in that building. Like, you hear players talking about Adam Thielen, respected guys, other guys who leave the building talking about, like, there were too many voices in his ear. Like, it sounded like a shit show. So you bring in Canales, who's supposed to be the short quarterback whisperer. He's going to get down to your level, and he's going to teach you how to play football. And you give him 2 weeks. So I'm not throwing a pity party for the guy, nor do I assume that I know if he is an asset worth taking a shot at for one of these guys. But I'll say the evidence overwhelmingly points to there being hope for this kid. And I hope for his sake he doesn't play another down in Carolina. And that's not to say I'm like, I think, you know, like, high picks who don't pan out deserve pity. But it's hard being a high pick. Like, of course, nobody's ever going to feel sorry for you because they pay you right off the bat and you do get opportunities. But your success in the number one team sport in America is evaluated totally differently than everybody else in your rookie class. Oh, and by the way, the reason you're here is because it's a dumpster fire where they drafted you, right? And you have to solve the building's problems. And there is a reason contextually that you are there. So not only is the ask unrealistic, it would be unrealistic of a quarterback of, I don't know, Joe Burrow's ilk to come into Carolina and make it work. How do you think Patrick Mahomes would look with that group last year? You know, how did that passing offense with Andy Reid calling the plays and the guys they had last year look when things are not right in an NFL offensive room? So the point I'm making is, you know, give this kid a chance. Give him a fucking break. Like, I cannot imagine. I know what it's like to start slow as a top 5 pick. You know, I know it's like at the end of the day for people to say, oh, you didn't play. You know, I had a first-round career If you'd have drafted me 15, everybody's ecstatic. They drafted me 2. I went out and played my ass off, played hurt, played on shitty teams, played without leads, and people will still call you a bust or whatever the fuck they want to say. I cannot, and at times in my career when I was young, it nearly wrecked me for a year, at least. I can only imagine what it's like being him. And I'm pretty mentally tough. I'm a headstrong motherfucker. I'm never say die. I can only imagine what it's like being that kid and putting the tape that he's put out over the first year and 2 weeks of his career in a tornado of a situation where you're expected to do way more than an edge rusher drafted in the top 5. Like, I feel for the guy. I'm sorry. You can call me a fucking softy or whatever it is, but I do feel for these quarterbacks. Now, a guy that I feel for is Caleb Williams. We talked about this the other night. I feel for him getting hit so damn much. I mean, like, I definitely think he earned some toughness points. But again, I want to be clear. Y'all said that situation was amazing. Y'all put this team in the damn playoffs. Y'all got mad at me, little old me, when I read their schedule in May and gave them 9 wins on the season. And I thought I was being kind. And it's like, oh, fuck you very much, Chris. You don't believe in this group. It's the best offense that a rookie quarterback has ever walked into. And I don't think that's necessarily true. We get really into the shiny objects and like, oh, wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Part of the reason I argued against making the move last year was because I was like, maybe your team's not quite ready. But here we go. Let's do it. And he gets fucking pummeled the other night. And I want to give credit to Houston, but the point I'm trying to make is, like, that situation that you're complaining about Caleb being in is 100 times better than the situation Bryce Young's in and has been in. So I look at that and I say, give these guys, whether it's Caleb Williams or Bryce Young, time to develop in the right circumstance. And part of that for Chicago now is going to be like, get to the quick game. We said it last week. Don't get this guy killed. They couldn't control the fact that D'Amico went Wink Martindale on that ass the other night. Like, that was just a call he made. I mean, he was like, we'll see. And part of it might have been Shane Waldron. He might not think Shane Waldron has the answers. It wasn't necessarily a referendum on Caleb. I guess the point I'm trying to make is, with all that having been said, when you're Caleb Williams, and I watched this clip 100 times probably over the last day, and I watched it before I had sound, and CJ Stroud and you meet at midfield, this ain't a hit job. Again, people that are pro Caleb Williams are going to point out that I said don't put him in the Hall of Fame in the preseason. Like I'm a villain for saying that. People are going to point out that I'm saying this thing right now, and I want you to know that I don't dislike this kid. In fact, I complimented his toughness the other night. But when CJ Stroud walks over to you at midfield and daps you up, you should be in a handshake or a picture, they always are like, who's leaning into the apex, who's leaning away. That's the power struggle. CJ actually had to say, no, come here. You know what I mean? And I'm no body language expert, but when I was a young player, because we got into it today talking about this, and Ryan's on kind of my team with it, and Bill was just kind of like, I'm staying out of it. And Chad was like, no, he's pissed off about the game, and I get that. And also, there are microphones around in the whole thing, but, like, welcome to the NFL. When the guy that's where you're trying to go, and maybe he resents him for setting this kind of standard, I know I would, for a rookie quarterback. When that guy walks up to you and tries to give you some game, I'm soaking it up. And, the body language I got was like, yeah, I got you. And CJ Stroud's a real dude because he didn't think about what he was going to say before. I think they just ran into each other and CJ was like, oh, yo, like, let me tell you what's on my mind. And then the kid started to walk away and he was like, stop taking those hits. Hey, come here. I got to tell you something. It was like he really cares how this kid's career goes. And you might say, hey, who the fuck is CJ Stroud to be giving people advice? Do you watch the games? The guy's 22. He plays like he's 30. He's trying to big up the kid and help him. My point to Chad was, I don't care how frustrated you are after the game. I was the most frustrated person on the planet after most of those Rams games. I'd have a bunch of people in town, be like, what are we doing tonight? Sitting in my fucking living room, and I'm going to drink this 12-pack of Schlafly beer. And you're going to sit there, and we're not going anywhere, right? Or I'm not going to Whole Foods for 3 days. I'm not going to the damn grocery store this week. Fridge is empty. I don't want to see a soul. It's so embarrassing to lose in the NFL, the way we were losing. So I know Caleb's skin's crawling. But after one of those games, we played the Cardinals, and this guy, Mike Gandy, he was a good player. He was a tackle. He was a starter, but he wasn't a household name. And part of the conversation was like, well, it depends on who's coming up to you and that sort of thing. Like if it's Julius Peppers, yeah. My point is, I don't care who it is. If somebody's giving you game, I want to listen. I want to hear. And again, this is not a hit job on Caleb because I think he showed a lot of toughness the other night. And maybe he was just trying to get the fuck off the field because he was disappointed. But don't give people ammo, man, because everybody's looking at that footage. And I know maybe you're trying to skate, so you're not on mic'd up getting advice from CJ. Maybe you feel punked or whatever, but or big boyed. But you know how bad it's going to look if you're pulling away. And this guy, Mike Gandy, I remember after the game, came up to me and was like, hey, man, you got some good rushes. He's like, save your best ones for the fourth quarter. You're coming out there and you're winning a lot of rushes, but you're winning rushes at times when it doesn't make sense to win the rush. You're wasting a rush. And his point was, and it's kind of counterintuitive, and I never quite got here, but I took it and I put it in the back of my head and worked on it, was like, this guy gave me some free game. He goes, I'm retiring next year. He goes, so I don't have to deal with you anymore. I've been playing you a couple games. I think you're a real good player. I think you got potential. He's like, you just got to save some of your best rushes. You're beating me with a spin in the first quarter. Save that for 3rd and 12. And I'll never forget the conversation. And I'm so appreciative that he had it with me. Of course, I'm not in a mob of people, and I'm not Caleb Williams, and people aren't overanalyzing every damn thing I do like I'm doing now. But the point is, don't give us any ammo. And more than anything, CJ Stroud's a real motherfucker, and he's trying to give you some game. And I would hope they talked offline to continue that conversation, because that would be the first conversation I would be having.